This little book, I don't know if anyone's ever seen it. It's from the North Andover Library, and it's called Anne Bradstreet Selections from Her Work, edited by Nancy V. Weir from 1998. And this is really what started me on this quest for poetry. I majored in biology. I didn't have any interest in poetry. So it was a very, very surprising thing to me to fall in love with poetry. And I did it in the 90s because of this book and because of Anne Bradstreet. So this book is available in the Stevens Memorial Library and in the Newburyport Library. And I will read one of the poems from it, and I don't even need to look at it because I feel it tells you exactly what we're here for. To my dear children, this book by any yet unread, I leave for you when I am dead, that being gone, here you may find what was your living mother's mind. Make use of what I leave and love, and God shall bless you from above. I feel we're all her children. We are her legacy. So I feel good to be called a child for a little bit of time. Okay, now, if you could introduce yourselves, let's say, I think Marion was first.
Oh, I'm Marion Griswold, and I live in Greenfield, Mass, which is on the other side of the state. I went to college with Mark. He and my then husband were housemates for a while. And so I've known him a long time, and Natalie also, of course. And they became very close to my parents for years. And that's who I am.
Now, which college was it you went to?
Grinnell in Iowa.
Oh, Grinnell. Okay, very good. Very good. Yes, yes. I believe Mark was an Illinois boy.
Chicago, yeah.
Chicago, right, right. So, and Linda.
Somehow they have me as Linda, but my name is actually Anita. I don't know why it appears as
Oh, I'm
as
sorry. It
Linda.
says, oh, okay, Anita.
Yes, Anita.
Yes, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Anita.
So I met Natalie at HILR, but I'm sure I ran into her prior to that time at PA, but we've become friends, and I feel honored to have been invited to this.
I see. Thank you. Thank you. Sandy?
It's actually Candy.
Oh, Candy. I'm sorry. Sandy.
Thank
Yes.
you. No, I'm a longtime friend of the Schorrs, especially Miss Sarah, and that's how I met her parents many, many years ago when she was in middle school, I believe, right, Sarah? It's probably middle school, and I think Mark instills a love of poetry in anybody he meets, because he either has one that he's quoting to you at that particular time of day, or he will send you a little note, or he would just make suggestions. And as a result, I fell in love with Mary Oliver, because I think in New England, she brings nature inside in those cold winter months. And so that's my connection.
Very good. It's so true. She's a lovely poet. Now, Kevin.
Natalie and I were colleagues for many years here at Phillips Academy, where I'm still teaching. So I'm a longtime friend of all the Schorrs, and glad to be here.
Very good. Thank you so much. And Sarah, where are you?
So I'm calling from Denmark, where I live. And my dad was my first favorite poet, and a few others are Audre Lorde and E. Cummings, and also Mary Oliver. I'm excited to be here.
Very good. Excited to have you from such a long distance away. Now, is there anyone I'm missing? I'm not sure if there's anyone else.
Red and Janna. Are they
Pardon
there?
me?
David and Janna.
Oh, David. Oh, of course, of course.
I'm David Smith. I have been a friend of Natalie since adolescence, when I attended the boarding school where her father was a Latin teacher.
I see.
And I'm Janna Smith, and relatively late to the party, having only met Natalie and Mark probably in 1973. And as far as poetry goes, a great admirer of certainly of Anne Bradstreet's, but many others. It's hard to pick a favorite. I just have to apologize that we may have to leave before the end because of a prior Zoom political meeting commitment that we made, but we are delighted to be here.
Well, thank you for coming at all. I'm happy to have you. Do you have a favorite poet, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. Frost is
Good.
at the very top of my list, right up there in the top 5.
I believe that for quite a few Americans, that would be the answer. Really. Now, Natalie, oh, hello, we've got here. Oh, this is Chris.
Christopher.
Christopher, I'm sorry.
Hi.
Christopher, hello. Welcome.
My name really is Christopher. Christopher Jane Corkery. I can't remember when I first met Mark, but oddly, my husband met him before I did. They were two of a group of then poets who sat around the table with Gordon Carney at the Grolier Bookshop.
Oh, wonderful.
Later, when I became attached to Tom Hart, my husband, that's when I met Mark, but I don't exactly remember when.
Okay, okay. Excellent, but that's a good thing. It's so long ago that you don't remember when. That's a very good thing with Mark.
That speaks to my brain. But...
No. Oh, no. Is that everyone? I hope we've caught everybody so far.
Not really.
Good morning, everyone.
Oh, hello. Good morning.
My name is Anne Marie Erler, and I'm a reading teacher. So love all kinds of literature and love sharing that with my students. I live and grew up in North Andover on a farm. So I'm excited to be here.
Very happy to have you. Very happy to have you.
And my name is Chris Karakas. 15 years ago, I was a colleague of Natalie and Kevin's in the chemistry department, so they may not remember me. I live in Rochester, New York now, and my connection with the Ridge is not just neighborhoods, but I've done several programs there through Gateways and other spirituality programs, and this popped up on my email earlier this week, and I saw Natalie's name, and I fell in love with poetry as a child, though my studies went in a different direction. And I thought, what a wonderful thing to be part of in the midst of the times that we're in.
Yes, I feel we need it. And I hope that this will be a monthly program. And I couldn't think of a better person to ask to start it all than Natalie Schorr. No, I mean, we want to talk about Mark, about Seamus Heaney, and Kevin, of course, you can jump in with that. And then also Robert Frost. So put the three together and it's a very powerful program. Natalie, would you like to pick up now?
Karen, I would. Thank you so much. And I'm so thrilled that you started with Anne Bradstreet. I thought Sarah might add that she sent me a little message saying, do you think you could read something by a woman poet? So you did exactly what needed to be done, Karen.
Thank you.
Touch. And I wanted to say, I was thinking about the people of the Frost Foundation. I wanted to say in tribute to all of you, that I had to try to think of what were the reasons why this wonderful effort had not only survived, but thrived over 24 years. Mm-hmm. And Mark was involved in it from the beginning, so I had a good look, and I thought of 4 attributes, and one was the devotion of the people. And there were Les Bernal and Matt Cornelis, the founders right at the beginning in 1996, and Mark was there on the board from the beginning. Mary Ellen Gennaro was the executive director. And then over the years, Jim Knowles, Ray Landry, with whom Mark took a basho trip to Japan. Helena Milton was involved for a long time. Kathleen Aponic was involved in proofreading, one on a side. Rich Gorham, of course, in the Lawrence School, was teaching Frost and helping bring students in. And Larry Dorsos working with students too, and it's very touching to see that continuing. I wanted to give a special mention though to Gary Keating and Jessica Sanchez, both of whom died this year, both of whom grew up in Lawrence and contributed in extraordinary ways to the Frost Foundation. Gary Keating as a Frost scholar, and I brought along, there was so much show and tell I wanted to bring. I only found one copy of the Frost Trail, and I rather loved the fact that it was the copy in Spanish.
In Spanish, yes.
Another wonderful thing that the Frost Foundation did, it did not only the Frost Trail in English, showing the Frost places in Lawrence, but the Frost translated, probably by Rena Espaillat, who also did some marvelous translations.
Translations, she did.
Impossible, but she did. So there's devotion to the people, the enormous range of activities. If I started talking, and of course I want to talk to Chris Karekis, there's so many things, conflicting things I'd like to do right now. But the enormous range of activities, I can't even start to name them all, but I do remember particularly going to a recitation, I think at the Weatherby School, and seeing an eighth grade boy who'd learned a poem for the first time by heart and how thrilled he was. And he told me, I stayed up all night learning this poem. Would you like to hear it? And of course I did want to hear him practice it. And he was so proud. And just seeing that sort of experience over and over was thrilling. And Mark could always listen just as well to a 12-year-old as to Robert Frost. And then Jessica Sanchez brought this incredible spirit of inclusiveness, which was the third characteristic I wanted to mention. She could bring in all kinds of people and had a great feeling for Lawrence and for the people of Lawrence, and a great love of poetry too. And she died much too young. I miss her. So all of these people brought a sense of Lawrence pride, but I would say the last attribute I wanted to mention was that they had a great poet, and none of this would have been any good if you talked about one of the greatest American poets. I really think he's one of the greatest of all time. But the whole point about poetry is we don't rank poets, and this is what made it possible for me to speak today. In a sense, I was thinking of Seamus Heaney, and this was something great that Mark did. When Seamus was giving his talk, Mark suggested that he talk about both his poems and Frost's poems because he thought they had a lot in common and a lot of common themes. And Seamus said, no, even though Seamus had a Nobel Prize in literature, he said, no, I can't be up there on the pedestal with Frost. And Mark had planned a year ahead because he thought Seamus would be good for him to have a year to think about it. And the reason went on aside, oh, by the way, did I mention that Kevin was co-editor? I wanted to add that to his bio, Kevin O'Connor.
Definitely, don't forget.
On the side, yeah. Anyway, what I found so moving at the beginning was I thought, oh my goodness, Seamus Heaney really expresses what poetry does. So this was what was great about Mark. If I had been told by Seamus Heaney I can't do it, I would have just said, okay, Seamus, I'm sorry I asked, that was kind of stupid. And Mark actually made him do it. And it's a great, the reason I love the book is I think they both come off so well. And right at the beginning, Seamus talks about being a student at school. He wasn't a poet then. And hearing Frost's poem Out, and realizing that poetry could help you put into words things that were so painful that you didn't think you could talk about. And then he gives a poem that he wrote when his younger brother died. Both of the poems extremely simple on the surface, but extremely complex underneath. And Mark did this with the Frost Foundation. He said at the beginning of his memoir, Song of My Selfies, each person has memories within him or herself waiting to be released. If the right string can be plucked at the right moment, the person's song will be released. And Mark, having written about 1,000 poems, of course, has one on every subject, and he happens to have written a poem about Anne Bradstreet. So I want to start with that. And this is in memory of his mother, and it's called At Anne Bradstreet's Grave. Needing to be clear, but finding no guide besides your tree. To somewhat hear, unadorned, your voice. One is a stately pine, the other simply a cone that tries to find a spot to land that might be thine. Now guided well, the spot is found under the same ancient tree, and this time bear the voice that will rejoice with thee.
Beautiful.
And I mostly wanted to focus on poems about Lawrence, but I thought I would start with a couple of sonnets because Mark in turn learned from Robert Lowell. He happened to run it. He'd met Lowell a couple of times and ran into him. I think they were waiting for a plane. And of course, Mark asked him about how he wrote, and Lowell said that he wrote sonnets in his notebook. That was his way of living, really. And certainly poetry became Mark's way of living. And another example of what poets do for each other, I don't think it's a case of reading Keats and saying, now I'm going to write like Keats. But Keats shows you in a way how it can be done. And this poem I'm reading, Amniocentesis, I'm reading because of just 2 words from Keats, Bright Star. And Mark said he was driving home from Milton, and we had just found out that we were going to have a second child, and actually maybe not just found out because we just had amniocentesis and had the results of that. And he said the poem came to him as a whole poem, and he had to pull up at the side of the road and write it down. And so here's that poem, Amniocentesis. Bright star, you strain to pass your news to us, and we interpret you as best we can. Count your auras to know you're there, and that you seem to conform to all imagination knows. Though you're still signal in our minds, you will stop short of what eyes can see on the clearest night. As that proud king transported news to Galilee to find his wildest dreams surpassed around a star, so driving home tonight, I wish myself as close as you are still, and that I could impart in form as free your information as you still seem to be.
Wow.
And the second poem, I also wanted to read another personal poem without reading a mushy love poem that Mark wrote about an experience that we had together. And this was when we went with a friend who showed us how we could, the Pont du Gard, I think you all can picture it, this enormous Roman aqueduct. And it's on top, all full of tourist buses, thousands of people. And I'm not putting that down, I've done that too, and that's fantastic. But a friend of ours, Francois Raoul, showed us a place down the river where we could slip into the Gardon River without being noticed and swim right under the Pont du Gard. And it was just an unforgettable experience. And of course, Mark went home and wrote about it. So this is at the Pont du Gard. The sun and summer are at their height when, on a whim, you and I have come to swim here along the limestone heavy Rhone. I think of those before us on these triple arcs, whose sure footings have bridged this way between their many layered openings of mind and the load-bearing arches of their hearts. The sweet inhalations buoy my chest, neither too low nor too high, along the surfaces of breath, along the sight lines of the eye, like some sleep study in which an EEG pens a line of arcs, extending what I see from point to point within some ancient river of dreams. And Mark came from Chicago, and he said in Song of My Selfies that he felt right at home in Lawrence and it reminded him of Chicago. So I thought I'd read a Chicago poem and then a love poem to Lawrence. Chicago. Beautiful city from which I came, forever amber. I want to show the sweep of your broad-backed, spacious skies, from the fetal heartbeat of your R&B, or the race riots of your armillary bridges, from the polluted sweep of your inland sea, or the glacial remains of your Middle Western land, as varied as your face-bricked 1-acre prairie lots or your recycled synagogues of iron column gesso, and your tight immigrant enclaves there that made Martin King cry with despair, your lion porched and roof shimmered art palaces that washed away almost every nightmare. Beautiful city, always changing in my mind, defining that which cannot be defined. And moving on to Lawrence, one of the things Mark loved about Lawrence was that Campagnon Common was designed by Olmsted, who had designed, of course, Jackson Park and South Park in Chicago. And he wrote this for the occasion of the dedication of the Robert Frost circulating fountain on Lawrence Common. Unlike your wilder cousin, west running brook, who cuts loose every spring without a backward look, you must wait up for the parks and recreation team to prime your pump as in a dream. Only then will you play and run all summer long among whoever comes your way to hear your song. No matter, 1 hour's water over rock is worth 1,000 garden hoses, so recirculate on this granite block for the love of bread and roses. And you know, Duck Bridge is the noisy bridge when you're driving from Andover into Lawrence. Those of you who do that, you know, there's a bridge that seems to go up.
It used to be, but they
it's not anymore. It's been repaired.
No, I'm so sad that's gone.
Oh.
They've covered it over with asphalt.
Oh dear.
You can no longer see into the Merrimack River from that bridge when you're standing in.
Oh, that's terrible. This is now a historical document.
Very sad.
Crossing Duck Bridge. I read this the other day, and I had just thought Mark did a poem of Duck Bridge, so we can see the old Duck Bridge here.
Yeah.
You know, I just thought, okay, well, he wrote a poem about Duck Bridge, and then I realized, oh, it has a really revolutionary subtext, all built into the noise of the bridge. You know Duck Bridge is singing when wheels make the sound of marching men and feel their revolutions meld below into the ripples' dappled flow along the length of cottonwood fill that divides the river from the mill. And one last poem, Atrium. I know Sarah likes this one a lot. And it's a teaching poem. It's a very joyful teaching poem, and it was written about students in Lawrence when Mark was about to go into the room. Atrium. I headed for my early morning walk around the bricked-in corner of the square and saw that every window there had blinds all drawn. And I wondered why each window would present its blinded eye, until I followed students through the door and followed sunbeams along the floor, knowing then that I had come into their sun-drenched atrium. Well, I'm going to move along to one on a side, which I love. And I find, you know, I used to really agree with Robert Pinsky, who used to say, the only thing you should say about a poem is, read this, I think you'll like it. And so often I don't like hearing people talk about poetry. I'd rather they just read the poems. But Seamus Heaney, I think, is very moving in the way he talks about Frost. He made me understand things about Frost. And I just thought I'd read his introduction to Frost's poem, Out, Out, and then read the poem that Heaney was able to write years later because of having been opened up by Frost's poem. Frost himself was a master craftsman, something indeed of a wizard with words. The longer I read him, the more I appreciate the wizardly side of him, his ability to weave a lyric spell, to conjure with the musical mesmeric effect of language. But I have to say that when I first came to his poetry, this side of Frost that absolutely riveted me was his resolute down-to-earthness, the Frost of things as they are. The first poem is his that I remember encountering was the one called Out, Out. Out, out, brief candle, says Macbeth. And the lines from Macbeth from Act 5, Scene 5 are, life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. What happens in Frost's poem raises the question implicit in Macbeth's speech. What does it signify, our life here? This is also the question in Frost's mind when he tells of an accident in a New England farmyard. Suddenly, shockingly, a child loses his hand in a buzzsaw. That's it. A family loss, fierce and bewildering, but the family is left with no choice but to go on with their daily tasks. I begin with this poem because I think it is completely available to the person who is utterly shy of poetry, and there are still a few of them around. Out. The buzzsaw snarled and rattled in the yard and made dust and dropped stove-length sticks of wood, sweet-scented stuff when the breeze drew across it. And from there, those that lifted eyes could count 5 mountain ranges, one behind the other under the sunset far into Vermont. And the saw snarled and rattled as it ran light or had to bear a load, and nothing happened. Day was all but done. Call it a day. I wish they might have said to please the boy by giving him the half hour that a boy counts so much when saved from work. His sister stood beside them in her apron to tell them supper. At the word, the saw, as if to prove saws knew what supper meant, leaped out of the boy's hand or seemed to leap. He must have given the hand, however it was. Neither refused the meeting, but the hand, the boy's first outcry was a rueful laugh. As he swung toward them, holding up the hand, half in appeal, but half as if to keep the life from spilling. Then the boy saw all, since he was old enough to know, big boy, doing a man's work, though a child at heart. He saw all spoiled. Don't let him cut my hand off. The doctor, when he comes, don't let him, sister. So, but the hand was gone already. The doctor put him in the dark ether. He lay and puffed his lips out with his breath. And then the watcher at his pulse took fright. No one believed. They listened at his heart, little less, nothing, and that ended it. No more to build on there. And they, since they were not the one dead, turned to their affairs. And this is what Seamus says in response to that. The first time I heard that read, it went home unforgettably, like the accident itself, into consciousness. But I also remember that there was a class discussion and the teacher proposed, maybe even believed, that there was something callous about the end of the poem, because after this dreadful thing happened, the people, and then quotes, since they were not the one dead, turned to their affairs. Thus the question was raised, was this continuation of things, this return to what had to be done, was this a failure? Some people said yes, definitely. But I remember making bold to say no, because I knew from my own experience of such accidents that all you can do the morning after the funeral is what you have always done. Keep going and get on with it. Regretfully, perhaps stoically, but with a broken rather than a hardened heart. So for me, that first poem had the shock of reality in it, and I will never forget it.
Yes.
I'll skip ahead to the poem that Seamus Heaney was able to write about his brother's death. Midterm break. I sat all morning in the college sick bay, counting bells, knelling, closed classes to a close. At 2 o'clock, our neighbors drove me home. In the porch, I met my father crying. He had always taken funerals in his stride, and Big Jim Evans saying it was a hard blow. The baby cooed and laughed and rocked the pram when I came in, and I was embarrassed by old men standing up to shake my hand and tell me they were sorry for my trouble. Whispers informed strangers I was the eldest away at school as my mother held my hand in hers and coughed out angry, tearless sighs. At 10 o'clock, the ambulance arrived with the corpse stanched and bandaged by the nurses. Next morning, I went up into the room. Snowdrops and candles soothed the bedside. I saw him for the first time in 6 weeks, paler now, wearing a poppy bruise on his left temple. He lay in the 4-foot box in his cot. No gaudy scars. The bumper knocked him clear. A 4-foot box, a foot for every year.
Absolutely amazing.
I thought I'd read the last Frost poem too, but I also want time for people to talk at the end. So I think I'm going to close instead and just say, read the book. You have this book and it's absolutely wonderful. Every time I read it, I feel as though something is opening up for me. But this is a poem that Frost wrote at age 18. And I remember that when Mark would go to poetry booths, he wouldn't read his own poems, but he would always read a poem of Frost's at the end. And I think this is a really special one for Frost and Lawrence because Frost was co-valedictorian with Eleanor White, whom he married. And this is a farewell to Lawrence High School. So it's very special in that sense. And even at the age of 18, he was pretty good. It seemed like a simple poem. I thought it seemed like a simple poem. And then I realized, oh, even in that, there's a word I had to look up, runnel, which means a stream. So, okay. Class hymn, 1892. There is a nook among the alders, still sleeping to the catbird's hush. Below, a long stone bridge is bending, above a runnel's silent rush. A dreamer hither often wanders and gathers many a snow-white stone. He weighs them, poised upon his fingers, divining each one's silvery tone. He drops them. When the stream makes music, fair visions with its vault voice swell. And so for us, the future rises as thought stones stir our hearts farewell. So this is Robert Frost, Lawrence High School, 1892. I thought of two other things as we end this part. And one is that I'm not sure if I mentioned as one of the gifts to Lawrence that we had a relationship and have had an ongoing relationship with Leslie Francis, who is Robert Frost's granddaughter. And she has been a wonderful source of inspiration and generosity and friendship to Lawrence and the Frost Foundation. And I thought of something else, which was that David Smith was in a class that Robert Frost visited at Andover. So I'm hoping he'll talk about that. But anyway, I will end there so that other people can talk. And let's go.
That was wonderful. Well, Mr. Smith, would you like to speak first because you have to leave soon?
Well, I was in an assembly where Frost read, and there were probably 800 of us there, so it was not exactly an intimate experience. But I was also friends with people who ran the Phillips Academy Literary Magazine, and they discovered in our senior year in the archives of the magazine a poem that Frost had written and contributed to it from Lawrence High School in 1890 or so.
Wow.
And it had been published under an assumed name in the Andover magazine. And so later on, when I got to college, the editors and I were invited to a Frost house in Cambridge one evening and spent a whole evening with him, just three of us.
That's what I was thinking of, I guess.
Memorable experience.
Wow. Special. Very special. I'm just remembering the time I met Seamus Heaney at the program on October 26, 2002, which the book came from. And how exciting that was. I was able to speak with him for a short time and in a reasonably private area and just spoke about children. And he was under the impression that, of course, every child must learn poetry at an early age. Always. That is a very important thing that we need to teach and keep teaching, especially nowadays. It's so important. Now, Mr. O'Connor, could you please tell us your your memories, your connection, you and Natalie and Mark.
Yeah. Well, it was so great to hear those poems, Natalie. And the sonnets particularly, I really love. I just think that Mark was a really fine poet. And as you remember, I chose one to read at the memorial service for Mark. And also great, those stories you told about Mark asking Seamus to write about Robert Frost's influence on his own poetry. And I didn't know that he, demurred at first and that Mark had to convince him to do that. But it was really great because not knowing that we would ever edit together one on a side, I, of course, was at the event. And I wrote Seamus a letter afterwards and said, that's one of the most remarkable talks I've ever heard because it's rare, in my experience anyway, to hear a poet talk with such candor and even intimacy about another poet and to share that openly, in a public speech. I just thought it was terrific. And later on, and of course, Mark and I both thought it was terrific and all, but it was Mark's project. He came to me and said, this is my idea. And so the way I've told it before is that I was sort of Seamus's guardian and he was Frost's guardian, So we always had to come to a meeting of the minds somewhere in between, one on a side. Also, I want to say that thanks for bringing up Leslie Francis, because I met her when Seamus had come to Phillips Academy in 1998, and I got to meet her. In fact, I met her in my kitchen of my apartment that I'm in right now. We had the reception here, and Seamus did as well. And then I started talking to this woman in the kitchen. I said, "Now, who are you?" And and then she introduced herself, and then I introduced the two of them. So, and then it led to the wonderful talk that became One on a Side at Lawrence High. So all of that is great to hear.
What an evolution! Wonderful evolution. Now, other people. How about Sarah? Where are you, Sarah?
I'm here. Oh, good. I'm unmuted. I wanted to say that this was really special for me to hear. And thank you, Karen, for this wonderful event. And Mom, it was really wonderful to hear you say that. And I just had a question about the last poem that you read of Frost, where he was, where is that? Where can we read that?
Out. I think it would.
No, not that one. The
ballad. Oh, okay. Well, I found it. Oh, I'm sorry.
Please circulate that after this.
Yes, I found it in a program that Mark had prepared for one of the Frost festivals. So I think there's probably a copy in the Lawrence Library. But as I say, I found this in the Frost Festival program for one of the speakers. Yeah, that year, David Ferry and George Kalogeris were speaking. But anyway, that's my source, and I'm sure.
I don't know if it's if it's not against copyright, it would be great if you could circulate that one, maybe.
Okay, sure. I'll try to find out, or maybe I shouldn't try to find out. Okay.
Good. Now, Candace, what was your reaction?
It takes me back in time because I remember both being at some of the Frost festivals, but also at the Lawrence High School when Seamus Haney was there. And I mean, it was such a moving night. How could you not love being in Lawrence, being in that high school, and having somebody of that notoriety up there talking and being emotional about Robert Frost. And of course, Mark was always emotional about Robert Frost, so it had special meaning for me.
You're right. It was a deep love, it was a sincerely deep love. So,
And I also want to thank you, Karen, for putting this together. What a wonderful use of technology in this crazy time, surreal
well,
time.
thank you. And I had no idea how to do it. Annie Smith.
Is
He's
there a
my savior.
recording? Is there a recording of that
Yes.
program at the high school?
Oh, I do not know. There is.
There is. Yes, I have it on a DVD. Mhm.
Oh my, we'd all love to see that.
Try to get more copies when we're allowed to, get out in the world.
Yeah, I'd love to see that, Natalie.
Or maybe Rolling Ridge could put it on a Zoom for the bigger community as well.
But I actually recommend the book rather than the recording.
Okay.
Because the recording is not perfect quality. In fact, I was thinking Mark did a great job along with Kathleen and Kevin's help in transcribing it because it wasn't that clear. So, and what's also interesting is that it's a little bit different, that he definitely worked when Kevin spoke to him and he decided he would do it as a book. He had to go back and do a bit more work. It's the same talk, but of course it's more informal when he gives it his talk. So both are good.
Where is the book available now?
Lulu, L-U-L-U. If you go online to L-U-L-U,
okay,
you can get this. It's my favorite gift to give to people. And I think and Kevin certainly agrees with me. We have sort of a mission of trying to get a major publisher to bring this into Seamus Snead's works, because I think it's one of the greatest things he's done.
One of the reasons we're here today.
Yeah.
Yes. So anyone else want to speak? Marion, do you want to?
Oh, I've asked my questions. Thank you.
Okay. And I said, I'm sorry, it's not Linda.
It's Anita.
Anita, of course. Anita, what are your responses to this? Did you like it? Did you have questions?
I liked it very much, especially the one that end the parallel, the Macbeth speech, signifying nothing. I can't remember the exact line, but I especially like that one.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Now, Anne Marie, is it the other?
Yes. No, I just want to thank you. It was beautiful, so relaxing and lovely to hear the poetry on this beautiful day. And, I think it's so important that, especially as a teacher, that we share these things with students, especially these poets are long gone, but they're still part of, history and whatnot.
The human tapestry.
Yeah, I mean,
definitely.
Some of my students, have never even heard nursery rhymes, which is kind of heart-wrenching to think about.
That's Shel Silverstein,
Mm-hmm.
Eddie Batista Panic, Billy Collins. I mean, there are just so many people that they should be hearing.
Yep.
It's interesting. It was interesting to me to see in Lawrence that students absolutely loved learning the poems by heart.
Mm-hmm.
They do.
It gives
They
them
do.
a feeling for
Poetry
when they grow up.
Right.
I work every year with the Robert Frost Foundation with Mark's baby, the Poetry Bee. And we did it, and we still do it. We did it in Weatherby, as Natalie mentioned. We did in Partham, and we always do it at St. Patrick's, aka Lawrence Catholic Academy. We had Sister Ann. Now there we have another loss. Last December, and Sister Ann was the savior of that. I mean, she would work with every child in the 7th and 8th grade every day of the year to have them not just memorize it, embrace it, have it as osmosis going through their cells, every cell of their body. And as he said, once you have it for life.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so true.
May I try to show something? I don't know if this will come across or not. It's a poem, Natalie, I think I should get this to you. It's a poem, it's called Ode to Fords.
Oh, wonderful.
I see it.
Yeah.
And he mounted it on this old linoleum.
Yes.
It looks like a quilt.
Well, it's a piece of old linoleum that I suppose came from Ford's.
Yeah, I'm so glad you showed that. He did a movie about Ford's Cafeteria with Jim Sheldon, who was hoping to be here today, but he
Yes.
just had an operation. You know, and I'm glad you showed that because I was thinking the challenge of Mark's poetry is that when Mark writes a poem, it looks like this,
Right.
like
Uh-huh.
this,
Yep.
or like this. And sometimes I feel as though I'm taking the beauty out of them when I copy them over and make them look like conventional poems.
Shall I
But
read this
lots of
poem?
found objects that
Shall
are
I read Ode to Ford's?
Oh,
Sure.
please.
Ode to Ford's. Long hidden from the face of Main Street, the place where Andover gathers and comes home to the bottomless cup, the whole facade hung like a framed first dollar turning brown, with mural to remind us of the way it was. Now open to the light and air of summer days, the miracle of I-beam and columnar iron lets diners lounge about its columns and converse at tables reserved for minimum of 4 of the newfound Corinth at Andover Square.
Wonderful.
Wow, yeah, I don't have a copy of that, Marion. You type it out.
I'll send it to you, Natalie.
Keep it. If you like it.
No,
keep
no,
it.
I think you should have it for the
I'd
archive.
love to have a touch copy anyway. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you, Marion. That's lovely.
Natalie,
Christopher, yes.
I actually have to go. So this has been most enjoyable and wonderful to hear Mark's words again. I loved it, and to remember that night at the high school. Yeah,
We judged the poetry contest that time.
that's right. And
Deborah Warren won. And she, you know, Deborah Warren won is somebody we know and love, but it was all anonymous. So that was very serendipitous.
And then Jane Brox, don't forget Jane Brox.
Yeah, she did the introduction.
Yes, it was a lovely night.
Yeah, it was great. So thank you all very much.
Thank you for.
Thank you.
Sarah, bye.
Bye. Oh, I have to go too because my granddaughter's having her first birthday party, and so does Sarah.
We have to go to my Zoom birthday party. First birthday party.
It's going to be wonderful for her first year.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Yes, tell us her name.
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth. That's wonderful. Oh my.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Nice meeting everyone.
Sarah.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
We'll do it again next month. I hope you can join us.
Great.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Natalie, I'll see you.
Thank you, Anita.
Okay.
It is Anita.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks.
you. I really enjoyed it. It was great.
That's good. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Kevin. And Elise, thank you for, did you enjoy your part? What did you find that was your favorite?
Well, what I learned from Mark was a poet is a poet all day long. And I could tell when I was with Mark, he was thinking how he would use what he saw and what he heard and what he felt. And I'd never known a poet before, and I haven't since. So he's my icon of a poet.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so true. And he also was so human. So very human. Everyone was included. Thank you so much. See you next month. That concludes today's program. Come back the third Thursday of May, and we will have another wonderful local poet. There are so many in the Merrimack Valley, also known as the Valley of the Poets. Thank you, Rolling Ridge Conference Center. I hope everyone comes and sees the lovely, lovely property and the spirit that is the Rolling Ridge Conference Center with Reverend Lawrence Frost and, of course, Danny Smith. Bye-bye.